The single dad restored a widow's 1959 Cadillac, then her CEO daughter saw the name on the plate. The old Cadillac had been sitting beneath a faded oak tree for nearly 25 years, gathering dust, rust, and forgotten memories. Most people who passed the small countryside house saw nothing more than a broken piece of metal that belonged in a scrapyard. But on one bright spring morning, a struggling single father looked at the cracked chrome grille, the shattered headlights, and the weathered license plate, and suddenly froze. His hands began to tremble as though the car itself had whispered his name. He stared at the tiny engraved plate fixed inside the driver's door, and in that single moment, a secret buried for almost 3 decades came rushing back like a flood. He knew that restoring this forgotten 1959 Cadillac would not simply repair an old automobile. It would reopen a story of sacrifice, gratitude, and a promise that had never truly been forgotten. Before we continue, if you believe kindness and second chances can change someone's life, please take a moment to like this video, comment below, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel Kindness Tales Journey. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories that remind the world compassion still exists. Every morning before sunrise, Rowan Mercer packed lunch for his 9-year-old son, Elias, before walking him to school. Life had become an endless routine of responsibilities after Rowan's wife passed away from a sudden illness 4 years earlier. Since then, every dollar mattered. He owned a tiny auto restoration workshop on the edge of a peaceful town where most customers preferred cheap repairs over careful craftsmanship. Bills piled higher every month, yet Rowan refused to compromise his work. He believed every vehicle carried someone's memories, and memories deserved respect. Some weeks he barely earned enough to pay rent, but he still smiled every afternoon when Elias ran into the workshop carrying his school bag, proudly helping his father organize tools while sunlight streamed through the open garage doors. One warm afternoon, an elderly widow named Eleanor Whitmore slowly arrived at the workshop with the help of her walking stick. Her silver hair reflected the bright daylight, and although age had bent her posture, dignity still shined in her gentle eyes. She explained that she owned a 1959 Cadillac that had belonged to her late husband. It had not moved in decades, yet she wished to see it restored before the final chapter of her own life. She admitted quietly that she could not afford what such a restoration would normally cost, but she hoped someone might simply look at the car before dismissing her request. Rowan saw the sadness behind her smile and agreed to visit her home the following morning. When Rowan arrived, birds filled the air with cheerful songs as sunlight illuminated the faded white farmhouse. Hidden beneath an old protective cover rested the forgotten Cadillac. Dust floated gently through the air as Rowan carefully removed the cloth. Beneath years of neglect remained elegant curves, classic chrome, and timeless craftsmanship. Then his attention settled on a small custom identification plate attached beneath the dashboard. The engraved name read Arthur Whitmore. The world around Rowan seemed to disappear. Nearly 30 years earlier, Rowan had been a frightened teenager hitchhiking after running away from an abusive home. Hungry, exhausted, and hopeless, he had collapsed beside a rural highway under the scorching afternoon sun. Most passing cars ignored him until a beautiful blue 1959 Cadillac stopped. Its owner, Arthur Whitmore, had offered him food, clean clothes, and enough money to reach safety. Before leaving, Arthur had smiled warmly and told the young stranger that kindness always returns when least expected. Rowan had never forgotten that face, or that remarkable Cadillac. Now fate had brought him back. Eleanor noticed tears gathering in Rowan's eyes as he gently rested one hand against the old steering wheel. After hearing the story, she quietly admitted she had often wondered whether her husband's countless acts of generosity had ever changed anyone's life. Rowan answered simply by promising something he had never promised any customer before. He would restore the Cadillac exactly as Arthur had loved it, and he would only accept enough payment to cover essential materials. The labor would be his gift. The restoration quickly became much more than mechanical work. Every afternoon after school, Elias eagerly joined his father inside the workshop. Together they polished chrome until it reflected the blue daytime sky, rebuilt the aging engine piece by piece, stitched fresh leather matching the original seats, and carefully restored every emblem. Rowan often explained to his son that true craftsmanship meant honoring people, not chasing money. Elias listened carefully, slowly understanding that every bolt tightened and every panel polished represented gratitude for a kindness given long before he was born. Weeks passed, and the workshop slowly transformed into something filled with hope instead of financial worry. Curious neighbors stopped by to watch the classic Cadillac come back to life. Some even volunteered old spare parts hidden inside forgotten barns and garages. Retired mechanics shared advice. Local painters donated supplies. Without realizing it, Eleanor's old Cadillac began bringing an entire community together. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in a shining downtown skyscraper, Eleanor's only daughter, Victoria Whitmore, managed one of the country's fastest-growing automotive technology companies. Newspapers described her as one of the youngest CEOs in the industry. Investors admired her sharp decisions, competitors feared her determination, and employees respected her relentless work ethic. Yet success had slowly built invisible walls around her heart. Months often passed before she remembered to call her elderly mother. When Victoria finally visited the farmhouse one sunny weekend, she expected another quiet family lunch. Instead, she discovered the garage completely empty. Eleanor smiled warmly and explained that her beloved Cadillac was being restored by a local mechanic who reminded her of Arthur's generous spirit. Victoria politely nodded but secretly worried her mother was being taken advantage of. She decided to visit the workshop herself the next morning. Bright daylight poured across the small town as Victoria's luxury sedan stopped outside Rowan's modest garage. She immediately noticed the contrast between her polished corporate world and the humble building filled with honest work. Inside, Rowan and Elias were carefully installing restored chrome trim while Eleanor watched proudly from a nearby chair. Victoria examined the Cadillac with professional eyes. The quality stunned her. Every detail matched museum standards. She slowly walked around the vehicle before opening the driver's door. Her attention settled on the original identification plate carrying her father's name. Then she noticed another tiny engraved brass plate hidden beneath it. It read, "Restored with gratitude for the man who changed one lost boy's life. Rowan Mercer." Victoria stared silently. For the first time in years, she realized this restoration had never been about money. It had been about love. The realization struck harder than any business failure she had ever experienced. All her achievements, awards, and financial success suddenly seemed small beside one simple act of kindness her father had performed decades earlier. A stranger had carried that kindness in his heart for 30 years and had repaid it without expecting recognition. Victoria spent the remainder of the day quietly watching Rowan and Elias work together. She noticed the patience with which Rowan taught his son, the respect he showed every customer, and the pride he took in honest craftsmanship. She also noticed the aging equipment throughout the workshop and understood immediately that this talented mechanic had never received the opportunities he deserved. Instead of offering charity, Victoria made a different decision. She invited Rowan to demonstrate his restoration techniques at her company's heritage vehicle division. Engineers, designers, and executives gathered expecting an ordinary mechanic. What they witnessed instead was an artist whose understanding of classic automobiles exceeded anything found in textbooks. Rowan spoke not about profits or production numbers but about preserving stories through craftsmanship. His passion inspired everyone present. Within weeks, Victoria offered Rowan leadership of a newly created Classic Heritage Restoration Center funded entirely by her company. The center would preserve historic vehicles while training young apprentices who needed second chances just as Rowan once had. Rowan accepted only after ensuring he could continue serving ordinary families who loved their old cars. The restored 1959 Cadillac became the centerpiece during the center's opening ceremony held on a beautiful sunny afternoon. Community members, journalists, students, and veteran mechanics gathered beneath clear blue skies as Eleanor slowly stepped forward with tears shining in her eyes. Watching Arthur's Cadillac gleam once again under bright daylight felt as though a treasured part of her husband had returned home. As the applause echoed across the courtyard, Rowan looked toward Elias standing proudly beside the Cadillac. He realized the greatest gift Arthur Whitmore had ever given him was never the meal, the money, or the ride. It was the example that kindness creates ripples far beyond the moment it is offered. One compassionate decision had crossed 3 decades and transformed countless lives. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone you love, and tell us in the comments what act of kindness has stayed with you throughout your life. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who may need hope today. Special request: before this story ends, please comment the words, "Kindness always returns," if you believe even the smallest good deed can change someone's future. As the afternoon sun slowly settled across the town, the polished Cadillac reflected golden memories instead of sorrow. Eleanor smiled peacefully, knowing her husband's legacy had never faded. Victoria discovered that true success is measured not by wealth but by lives uplifted. Rowan finally understood that gratitude is most powerful when expressed through action, and young Elias grew up witnessing that genuine strength comes from compassion. Sometimes the greatest restoration is not rebuilding an old car, it is restoring faith that goodness never disappears. It simply waits for the right moment to come home.